Imagine being stuck in a traffic jam that literally lasts for years. And these are the kinds of traffic jams that would put any of your traffic experiences to shame. And here are the top 15 worst traffic jams in history. But before we start, if you're new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. Number 15, don't mess with the lions. Lions usually avoid people, but that's not what happened in January 2019, when 4 lions literally blocked the flow of traffic inside Kruger National Park in South Africa. Instead of roaming the vast plains of the park, they decided to walk side by side right in the middle of the road. And because the drivers were afraid to honk their horns and startle them, they had no choice but to slowly follow behind the lions. In fact, I'm sure you'll admit that the anxiety you'd feel would be on a whole different level if this was the reason you were stuck in traffic. Number 14, the Tokyo traffic jam. On August 12, 1990, motorists in Japan faced a huge challenge when they got stuck in one of the biggest traffic jams, involving around 15,000 cars. This happened along the 135-kilometer highway between Yogo and Shiga Prefecture in western Japan. The reason was that thousands of people were going home at the same time after a major national holiday known as Obon, or the Festival of the Dead. At the same time, many residents were also rushing to leave Tokyo because of warnings about an approaching typhoon, and the result was a severe gridlock that lasted for several hours, with vehicles barely moving at all. Number 13. 9/11. When there is an attack, it clearly causes widespread damage. But few people know that one of its long-term effects is severe traffic jams. When a tragedy like this happens, many people immediately try to evacuate the city because they fear for their safety. This is what occurred during the World Trade Center attack on September 11, 2001. Almost immediately, cars crowded the roads out of New York as people desperately tried to escape. Although later on some lanes were cleared to allow emergency vehicles to pass, the severe gridlock remained for several days after the incident. Number 12. Lyon to Paris. 12 brought to France, there are few places more famous than Paris and Lyon. From unique architecture to delicious food and historic sites, there's really almost nothing you can criticize. But in February 1980, their fame became the cause of one of the worst traffic jams in modern history. The winter holiday ended at the same time as severe bad weather. Because of this, people went home all at once while facing poor road conditions. The result? A bumper-to-bumper line of cars that was even longer than the distance between New York City and Philadelphia if you travel by car. Because of this, it remains one of the worst traffic jams in modern times. Number 11, the COVID complication. COVID-19 had a widespread impact around the world. But one place where many did not immediately expect its severe effects was at border crossings. Africa is one of the regions most affected when it comes to border congestion. After the virus spread, most African countries closed their borders. Although the entry and exit of goods is still allowed, every driver crossing the border is required to undergo COVID-19 testing. As a result, border processing took even longer when it already required several days to cross. Due to corruption and a slow administrative system, one of the most severe examples of this happened at the border between Kenya and Uganda. On May 27, 2020, the line of trucks on the Kenyan side behind the Malaba border crossing reached almost 50 kilometers. Although the situation was eventually resolved, it definitely caused a lot of inconvenience for the thousands of truck drivers who were stuck on the road for several days. Number 10, the Berlin Wall traffic jam. There's no doubt the fall of the Berlin Wall was one of the most significant historical events in modern times. It united a divided Germany and marked the end of Soviet influence in the region. Officials expected many people to cross to reunite with family and friends from the other side of the wall. But what they didn't anticipate was how heavy the traffic would be. Normally, only about 500,000 cars pass through the main routes each day. But this was April 12, 1990 Easter holiday, a year after the Berlin Wall fell. Suddenly, this number surged to an estimated 1.8 million cars, most of which came from the east. The result was a whole day of bumper-to-bumper traffic with cars barely moving. Imagine the frustration of people eager to cross but stuck for hours at a standstill on the road. This incident became even more historic when the Guinness World Records recognized it as one of the longest traffic jams based on the number of cars involved. And to be honest, it seems unlikely that anyone will break that record anytime soon. Number 9, the Woodstock traffic jam. When it comes to traffic jams that became part of history, few are as iconic as what happened in Bethel, New York from August 15 to 18, 1969. This is where the legendary Woodstock Music and Art Festival took place on a 600-acre farm at the height of what was called the Summer of Love. Needless to say, Woodstock was the place to be back then. Legends like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin performed here in front of an estimated 500,000 people. The problem was, this was more than 10 times what the organizers expected. Because of the huge crowd, there was a 4-day traffic jam along the 30-kilometer stretch between Montecillo and White Lake. Because it was moving so slowly, many festival goers decided to just leave their cars on the road and walk to the event. And because of this, it became almost impossible to get through the area. Fortunately, the musicians were brought to the venue by helicopter, so the festival pushed through and became a success. But the state troopers were left almost helpless in resolving the severe traffic jam. And in the end, most would agree on how legendary Woodstock was, and it seemed that even the traffic jam was worth it. Now, we keep doing our best in making videos, so if you're here, please don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit the like button. Number 8, Chicago snow. Snowstorms can cause severe damage, but only a few were as intense as the one that hit Chicago in February 2011. This wasn't just an ordinary snowstorm. The winds reached nearly 110 kilometers per hour while snow was falling at a rate of 5 centimeters per hour. In the end, the accumulated snow reached about 50 centimeters thick. In these conditions, it was almost unthinkable that there were still roads. But many drivers were surprised when Lakeshore Drive was stuck in traffic for almost 12 hours. Aside from the extremely dangerous driving conditions, 6 accidents happened within just a few hours, which made the situation even worse. The problem got even worse because of the intense cold. Many drivers had to be transferred to warming buses and taken to hospitals. Because the cars were left idling to keep the inside warm, many of them ran out of gas and ended up stranded on the highway. Some people were even forced to leave their cars and walk to the mobile warming station instead of waiting in the middle of the storm. After about 12 hours, the weather gradually improved, and those who were stranded in one of the worst snow-induced traffic jams in Chicago's history were slowly able to go home. Number 7, the Klondike Gold Rush. Usually, we don't consider lines of people as traffic jams, but it was different during the Klondike Gold Rush from 1896 to 1899. Thousands of people traveled to the Yukon hoping to get rich with gold. But to get there, they had to cross the Chilcot Pass, a steep route between British Columbia and Alaska. The problem at that time was that the pass could only be crossed by what was called the Golden Stairs, a set of about 1,500 narrow steps carved into ice and snow. It was so narrow that only one person could step on each stair at a time. Because of this, thousands of gold seekers crowded between the foot and the peak of the mountain. Progress was slow, the path was slippery, and the climb was so steep that it was an almost unbearable journey. Eventually, a horsepower tramway was built so that wealthier gold seekers could be carried up. Today, it's no longer as busy a route as it once was. But to this day, the legend of one of the most remarkable human traffic jams in history remains. Number 6, the British backup. Indonesia is one of the largest countries in the world in terms of population, with over 250 million people, making it the 4th most populous country in the world. And with such a large population, it's no surprise that it often experiences massive traffic jams. One of the worst happened in July 2016 in the town of Brebes on the main island of Java. Millions of people went home at the same time to celebrate Eid al-Fitr, the festival marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. Although the traffic jam was only 21 kilometers long, which is shorter compared to others on this list, the real problem was that cars barely moved for almost 3 days. Due to the extreme heat, exhaustion, and smoke from the idling cars, it was reported that 12 people lost their lives for various reasons, from fatigue to inhaling toxic fumes. Because of this incident remains one of the worst traffic jams in the history of Indonesia. Number 5, the Sinai situation. There are many reasons why traffic jams happen. Accidents, bad weather, holiday rush, but a full-scale war, that's not common. That's what happened in June 1967, when 15 ships from different countries were accidentally caught in a traffic jam that lasted 8 years. It all started because of the Six-Day War, where Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. The problem was the Suez Canal separates mainland Egypt from Sinai. To prevent Israel from using the canal, Egypt blocked it, planted mines, deliberately sank several ships, and destroyed the bridges at both ends. Because of this, one of the most important sea routes in the world remained closed. This was a major problem for global trade because ships were forced to go around the southern tip of Africa, adding approximately 8,900 kilometers to their journey. However, the situation was even worse for the 15 ships that were inside the canal when the Black Kid incident happened, because they had no way to get out. So they decided to gather at the Great Bitter Lake in the middle of the canal and wait there for the war to end. However, as the tension in the region dragged on, they realized it wouldn't end soon. And instead of going their separate ways, they formed a sort of mini-nation in the middle of the water. The ships were from Britain, West Germany, the United States, Sweden, Poland, France, Bulgaria, and Czechoslovakia, countries that were on opposing sides during the Cold War at that time. Despite this, they helped each other. The German ships held Sunday church services, the Bulgarian ship hosted weekly movie nights, while the Swedish ship organized pool parties. Imagine an 8-year traffic jam in the middle of the desert that turned into a unique community on the water. A situation so rare, unusual, and almost unbelievable in the history of traffic. In fact, in 1968, they even held their own Bitter Lake Olympics in the middle of the Great Bitter Lake, and the Polish crew won the most medals. Imagine sailors trapped in the middle of a war but still finding a way to organize games and bring a little joy. But as time went on, most of the crew members were sent home by the shipping companies, leaving behind what's called a skeleton crew, just enough people to watch over and maintain the ship. They waited a long time, but by 1973, the conflicts in the region gradually began to be resolved. And in 1975, the Suez Canal was reopened for global trade. Not everyone survived. One of the American ships sank after being hit by a stray rocket. Meanwhile, most of the other ships were almost unusable due to years of exposure to extreme heat, desert sand, and lack of movement. In the end, only 2 of the West German ships remained in good condition and could still be salvaged. So in May 1975, they finally left the canal and sailed back home. When they arrived in Hamburg, they were greeted by around 30,000 cheering people, an emotional ending to one of the longest and most unusual traffic jams in world history. Number 4, National Highway 110 traffic jam. If you think the traffic in your area is bad, it's probably nothing compared to what happened in China on National Highway 110 in August 2010. From August 13 to almost the 25th, there was a massive gridlock on the route connecting the China-Tibet Expressway. And surprisingly, it wasn't caused by a major accident. The problem was simple yet serious: too many cars on the road. This highway has long been known for being constantly congested, but things got even worse when many large trucks carrying construction materials from Mongolia to Beijing traveled at the same time, because there was almost no relay connection between those places. Because of the number of trucks, the road's capacity was reduced by almost 50%, and as a result, there was a 100-kilometer traffic jam with thousands of cars stuck. In some areas, there were cars that could only move about 1 kilometer per day. And because of the constant stopping and starting, many cars broke down on the road, which made the situation even worse. And as if that wasn't enough, there were some locals who saw an opportunity. They set up mobile stores using bicycles and sold water, instant noodles, and cigarettes at prices up to 15 times higher than normal. Later, Chinese authorities intervened. They allowed more trucks to enter Beijing and encouraged some trucking companies to temporarily stop operations or use alternative routes. In the end, by the end of August, the traffic had almost completely disappeared, and one of the worst traffic jams in modern history came to an end. Number 3, Hurricane Rita traffic jam. Storms, especially hurricanes, are among the most dangerous natural disasters in the world that can cause massive destruction and thousands of casualties. In August 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck and left around $100 billion in damages and over 2,000 casualties. So when news broke in September 2005 that Hurricane Rita was approaching southeast Texas and was expected to become a Category 5 residence, immediately panicked. On September 21, 2005, 2.5 million people simultaneously crowded Interstate 45 to evacuate. The result was a 160-kilometer traffic jam that lasted for more than 48 hours. In the midst of extreme heat, there were cases of heat stroke, fights, and even fires on the road that resulted in over 100 deaths while people were still evacuating. The chaos increased because the evacuation plan lacked organization. There were not enough contraflow lanes and the fuel supply was not prepared. So many cars ran out of fuel in the middle of the highway. Fortunately, when the typhoon finally made landfall, it weakened and was downgraded to a lower category. Although it still caused around 100 fatalities and $12 billion in damages, it was not as severe as many had feared. But the traffic jam caused by fear and mass evacuation was one of the worst and most chaotic scenes in American history. Number 2, the Red Cup Jam. No doubt, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association World Cup is one of the most anticipated sporting events in the world. Every time it's held, millions of fans travel to support their favorite teams. This is a big help to the host country's economy, but not to its roads. In June 2014, during the 2014 Fédération Internationale de Football Association World Cup in Brazil, a severe traffic jam started in São Paulo that eventually reached a length of 344 kilometers. To give you an idea of how bad that was, that's almost the same distance as the trip from Toronto to Detroit. But what's even more frustrating is that this could have been avoided. Before the tournament, there were 35 urban mobility rail projects planned to ease the traffic. However, only 5 were finished on time. Another one of the canceled projects was the high-speed highway that would have connected São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Instead of expanding the metro lines to the stadiums and city center, the authorities chose the cheaper option, which was to add more taxis. Because of this, the 2014 World Cup in Brazil is often mentioned as one of the least prepared editions of the tournament in modern times, especially when it comes to infrastructure and traffic management. Number 1, the Russian winter. If there's one thing that can definitely stop traffic, it's a severe snowstorm. Low visibility and slippery roads are enough to slow down any driver. But in November 2012, there was a storm in Russia that took the situation to another level. On the M10 highway that connects Moscow and St. Petersburg, around 10,000 cars were stuck in a 160-kilometer traffic jam. Drivers were stranded for 3 days in sub-zero temperatures. And to keep warm, they had to keep their car engines running, which quickly led to running out of fuel. Meanwhile, some roadside cafes sold sausages, bread, and cigarettes at prices almost 10 times higher than normal. Because of this, many drivers became angry and called on the Russian government to take action. However, since there have been few upgrades to the roads since the Soviet era, the authorities could do little, especially since many bottlenecks closed in some towns and cities along the route. After the traffic was cleared, the government began discussing various measures to prevent this kind of situation in the future. One of the proposals was to mobilize military engineers to help stranded motorists in future emergencies. But like many plans of this kind, only time will tell if it will actually be implemented and become effective. If you like this video, check out our binge-watching playlist so you can watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. And subscribe to our channel so we can see each other again in our next video.